Okay, now it's time to switch gears and add images to our website to help us add visual appeal to draw our attention or the viewer's attention to certain areas. Now, the first thing you have to do is set up your folder, and what I want to do is where your home page and where your pages that you created have been saved, you're going to create a subfolder called Images. Make sure you name the folder lowercase. It's going to make it easier when you start working with this. And you have to upload to a web server if you keep it all lowercase. Do not use spaces when you name a folder. And then what you want to do is you want to start adding your images into this folder. Okay. Now when we're working with web design, we're going to be working with three types of formats. We're going to be working with GIFs, JPEGs, and PNGs. Now these three formats, the most common one is a JPEG. Most likely, if you take any type of photograph, you're going to have it saved as a JPEG because it can house up to millions of colors. And so if you took a camera and you took a regular picture, most likely it's saved as a JPEG. There's different advantages between the three formats depending on what you're trying to use it for. GIFs are great for limited color. So if you have a logo or something that just has one or two colors, then those graphics are great for GIFs. PNGs are great when you have some transparency. I'm most likely I've started to go over and use PNGs more, especially when I want the background to be transparent. So there's different things to look at on that aspect. That's where you're going to need a program like Photoshop to make some changes to that. But the other aspect of this, you got to find images that you got to incorporate onto your website. Now, some of these images you can take with your own camera. Some of these you can get online through stock photos and things like that. Now, what I want to do is I want to copy. What you want to do is I want to copy the images I want into my images folder that I'm going to use. So again, what you want to do is you want to get those images copied in first, download it, move it into this folder. So you want all your images added into the images folder before you insert it in. If you don't, then you won't be able to find those images. So you have to organize it first. Organize by copying all your images into the images folder. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure you also look at the names. Just like your folders, I don't want to include spaces in a name. If you want to use underscores instead of a space, you can do so and keep it lowercase. Okay, now in this case there's a hyphen there. The hyphen can be used as well, but do not use a space on that part. Now this logo here happens to be a PNG file, and then all these other graphics happen to be JPEG files on that part. Now the other aspect you really kind of need to know is also the properties of the width and height of each image. Now some of these images are what we call as landscape, like this is BG, and then other images are portrait. So when you try to resize something down, you have to keep the right proportion on that part. If you don't, then you'll get things distorted on that. And it's also best to know what type of size that you're working with. Now if you're on a Windows, you can, you typically can leave your mouse over and it will tell you dimensions: 220 by 290, 102 by 150. All that good stuff. All the golfers are the same size, 220 by 290. So it's very similar to the Mac. You can also go to its properties and actually look at the file size. The key here is the dimensions, because what you want to do is you want your images to fit exactly within your sections that you created on that part. So you have to know the width and heights of your div tags that you added, and then you're going to kind of try to match up those sizes of your images to the div tag itself. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be working with this website. I've been working with a variety of different videos. Let me launch this into Firefox real quick. This is what it looks like. So what I want to do here is I want to add a logo up here in the top left hand corner of my header, so to the left of the hole in one. And typically on a website, usually use the top left as the most important part, and that's where a logo usually is added. And then in this red area, I want this area here to house one graphic. Okay, I could put other images over on the left, but in my plan, I only want one graphic added here to help draw attention to this. So there's two images we're going to be adding for this part. Now, excuse me, let's take a look at our code. First of all, we're going to put the image up here in our header section. Now, let me open up the style sheet real quick. For the header, its width is 960, its height is 150. Now, the height becomes important because we want the image to fit exactly to the height of the header. We don't care about the width as much because it's 960, it has text there, but we really want to make sure it fits exactly to the height. So that's going to become important when we look at our images here. And you're going to see here, when I go back to my images, the logo that I'm going to add is a height of, height of 150 already. So I've already manipulated that in Photoshop to make it the same size. Now you can do that in HTML as well, but just watch out for the proportions, because if you don't, then the proportions are going to make it look distorted on that part. So that's where you can get your trusty calculator out, and if your size of your image is like 3000 by 3000, what's the or let's say 3000 by 6000 pixels, what's the proportion? And you can use your calculator to calculate what the width and height should be. Now, the other aspect of this is we're going to put this other image in the sub 1 section that I created. Right now it's just blank, there's nothing there. And so sub 1 is above sub 2 where it says join now. So if I look at this real quick, there's the join now, and I want the image right there. Now we have to also be concerned about the width on sub 1 because we have constraints here. We can't have it go 960 across because we have this other section here. So we have to know the width, and we also have to know the height because we have something down below it. So let's take a look here real quick of sub 1. So here's sub 1. The width is 240, the height is 290. Now again, let's take a look at my images. So I'm going to put one of the golfer images in here. And if I leave my mouse over here, notice exactly what I have here. I have a width at 220 and the height at 290. Okay. Now its dimensions is a little bit less than the width what we have here. That's fine, and we'll see how it will look when we place it in, and then we'll go in and maybe modify our dimensions just a little bit on that part. So again, I got a plan how I'm going to add those images in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up into my header. I want the image to be on the left side of the hole-in-one on that part. To insert an image, we have to use the image tag, and then we have to use there's two main attributes, or two main attributes that you have to incorporate. First, you have to incorporate the source. This basically is telling where the image is stored in your folder. Now, most of the times you can just type in the image name, but however, we are storing the image inside the images folder. So we have to indicate that the file is stored or saved in the images folder. Without it, the browser will not know to find it in the images folder. So you actually have to basically indicate and tell it if you have a folder within the main folder, the subfolder, and then follow the actual image name. So in this case, within quotation marks, I'm going to type in images / and then I'm going to type in the actual name of the graphic, which is a PNG. Now, I also have to put in the alt attribute, which stands for alternative text. Now, if you're working with state agencies and state governments, you really have to have the alternate text. And these are not everybody can see the graphics. It could be a visually impaired person. It could be a company that just doesn't show the graphics. So what we need is an alternate text that basically describes what that image is all about. So in this case, I'm going to type in company logo. So a brief description is good for that part. And then, of course, the other two attributes you can actually add in is you can actually add the width and heights. Now the width, when we type in width, we could type in the measurement we're trying to fit in exactly with our div. Sometimes you can just include the width, and sometimes you include just the height by itself, or you include both. So in this case, I'm just going to type in 102px, and then I'm going to put in height equals 105px. I'm sorry, 150px. Now, when you do that, the image itself is already set to that dimension, but if you did not go in, you don't have Photoshop to resize it, you would have to put in your code, the actual width and height. So I'm showing you that because I want to make sure you're aware that you can do it in Photoshop. You can also go in and put it right here in the code as well. Then I'm going to put in a space at the end. I'm going to put a slash. Now the image tag does not have a closing tag like your text tags like H1 and P tag. So because the image is basically what we call a replace element, you're actually inserting the image in, so it does not need it, but you do have to put the space slash at the end of that. So let's go ahead and save this real quick. I'm going to launch this back in Firefox. And then look, the graphic fits nicely, but what happened to my heading? It's now overlapping in the main content. Why? Well, it's because of the way the coding is set up. What's happening is it added the image and then it's adding the H1 tag. Now H1 tag is what we call a block element. It asks to add, it basically creates presses return like on your keyboard, like if you're typing in Word, and it adds space above and below the text. So what we want is we want the image to be side by side with the text and the graphic. So we're going to apply a format to just this image tag, and we're going to basically tell it to float, and it's going to basically have the text side by side. To do this, we're going to add a class. A class allows us to specifically format a element compared to the rest. So if I go into my style sheet and I say IMG and I tell it to be width of this, every image on my page would have the same width. Now what we're doing is we're specifically saying I want this image with this class to only change its format. And we'll say class and then equals quotation mark, we'll say format image. Now we have to go to our style sheet. Let me save that real quick. And then we have to add a style to that. Now since we're adding it to the header, I'm going to add it right after here. Now since we're doing a class, we're going to start off with a period. And we got to then type in the actual name that we gave the class. Just like that. So in this case, I'm going to put my curly braces in, and then I'm going to go and apply a style. Now we have to incorporate the float style, and we talked about this with our layout. So now we're going to add it to our image. Anytime you want the text to wrap around an image, you just add a float left or a float right, and it's going to take the available space that you have there, and it's basically going to tell the browser, hey, use this space. And so it's going to move anything that's below it up to the side. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in float left semicolon. Now let's see, I'm going to save both and let's take a look at what it looks like right now. I'm going to click on reload, and now you can see that it has moved the text back up into the section I want. Now I want to move the graphic over a little bit so it's not right on the edge. So what I want to do is I'm simply going to add a little margin on the left and right hand side. So now I'm going to come in and I'm just going to add margin hyphen left, margin hyphen right, 30 pixels. I'm going to save that. I'm going to click on reload, and you can see how that moves the graphic over. Of course, it's going to move the text over a little bit as well because I have a little extra spacing on the right hand side. So again, the thing that we're doing here is we're putting the image up here in the header. We have to know the height of the header so we can also help us with the height of the image, because we wanted to match exactly on that part. Okay, now let's move on to our subsection where we have an image down there. So in this case, let me go back to the template. Sub 1, I'm going to type in img src again equals, then since I have an images folder, I'm going to have to put images, and I'm going to say golfer0.jpg. Okay. Alt, give it a description. If you need to put in the width because you don't have Photoshop to resize your images, again, right now I do have the images the exact size I want, but again, I'm putting this in to show you how you can modify the width and height, and I'm making sure it matches exactly to that sub 1 dimension. Okay, so I'm going to save this. Let's take a look at it right now. Now, because the dimensions are not exactly, you can still see some of that red there, because the dimensions are set up to be 240 for sub 1, and the image is set up to be 220. But look at the height. Height is fitting perfectly on that. Now, on this regards, we can do a couple different things. We can actually increase this height, the width, and so forth, so it fits exactly. But be careful, if you go in and you don't change the height, that might cause distortion on that. Now, if you do change the height, that's going to come down into the Join Now section. So this is, again, just like puzzles. So in this case, what I want to do is I'm just going to increase the width to 240. I'm going to change the height to 300. And let's take a look at it now. See, now it's fitting exactly in the area that I want. So you just have to kind of pay attention to the images that you're adding in and what the sizes are and how they're going to fit in a certain section. So for example, even if I put an image over here on the left side and I wanted to actually float, let's just say float over here on the right. Now the thing is, you have to know, will the image fit within that section? If it's too large, it won't fit and it's going to throw off your layout. But again, depending on what you're trying to do, you can do a variety of things to kind of draw attention to those areas. So one thing you might want to do is maybe you want to point out, join the hole-in-one golf league. Okay, if that's the case, where are you going to place the image? Well, I'm going to put it right here before my H2 tag. And again, do the same thing. I'll type in img src equals images slash right.png. Alt equals okay. Now I'm not going to put a width and height in here. Just going to leave it the way it is. And let me put my space slash in at the end. So let me save this real quick and I'm going to run this. Here's that green arrow, but notice what happens. Just like what happened in hole 1, it moves everything down because this here is considered a heading 2 and it has to add space above and below it. So if I want this arrow to be on the same area as the Join the Hole-in-One Golf League, then I'm going to do the same thing I did before and I'm going to add a class. Now the beauty of this is, in this case up here at the top where we say class equals format image, all we did here with format image was basically do a float left, margin right. Now if you want to use that same style for other images, you can actually use that with the same class. If not, you're going to have to come up with a different class. So at this point, I'm just going to see what it looks like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in class equals format image. And this is going to apply that float to make sure that anything's right after it would float to the side of it. So now I saved it. Let's take a look at this real quick. Okay, I click on reload. Now the text is to the side, but then you have issues with the graphic not lining up with the middle of the text and so forth. So that's when you have to go in and start experimenting with other styles. Like in this case, we can try to force the graphic down a little bit, but if you do so, you have to apply it to the format image style, and that's going to affect this logo. So in a case like this, you might have to create a new one, and I'll name it format image B. Okay. Then in my style sheet, I'm going to add dot format image B. I'm going to put in float left, and since I want to bring it down a little bit, I'm going to say padding hyphen top. We'll do 15 pixels at this time. I'm going to save it, reload here, and then you can see how it moved it down. Now maybe the text is too close. Okay, just like before, then we'll add a little margin on the right side. And forcing the text over. Okay, so when you tend to add images to your content, most likely you're going to be using that float option, and then you're going to have to do some other manipulation to your text to get everything to line up correctly on that. So here we showed you how to add images using the image tag. My more concern is making sure you have the width and height set correctly. Then also storing it in a folder called images. So you're going to bring all your images together on that, and then you just have to decide where you're going to place it. You know, if you have if your sketch, your layout, look where you want to place it and see what you can do on that aspect.